The elephant reached the outskirts of our town, breaking the fences down like matchstick. He would continue. It came into the main road and smashed all the stalls selling fruit, mud pots, and clothes. People ran helter skelter in panic. The elephant now entered a school ground where children were playing, breaking through the brick wall. All the boys ran into the classroom and shut the door tight. The beast grunted and wandered about, pulling out the football goalpost, tearing down the volleyball net, kicking and flattering the drum kept for water, and uprooted the shrubs. Meanwhile, all the teachers had climbed up to the terrace of the school building. From there, they helplessly watched the depredation of the elephant. There was not a soul below on the ground. The streets were empty as if the inhabitants of the entire town had suddenly disappeared. So here, Ishwaran was telling the story to his master Mahendran. He continued, the elephant reached in the town. He destroyed everything that came in his way. He entered the school where Ishwaran studied in junior class. All the boys ran into the classroom and closed the door. All the teachers went up to the terrace of the school. The whole town became empty. No one was there. I was studying in the junior class at the time and was watching the whole drama from the rooftop. I don't know what came over me suddenly. I grabbed a cane from the hands of one of the teachers and ran down the stairs and into the open. The elephant grunted and menacingly swung a branch of a tree with it held in its trunk. It stamped its feet, kicking up a lot of mud and dust. It looked frightening, but I moved slowly toward it, stick in hand. People were watching the scene, hypnotized from nearby housetops. The elephant looked at me, red eyed, ready to rush toward me. It lifted its trunk and trumpeted loudly. At that moment, I moved forward and, mustering all my force, wagged its third toenail on the quick. The beast looked stunned for a moment, then it shivered from head to foot and collapsed. So here, Ishwaran describes his own strength. He said he was studying in junior class at the time when the elephant entered in their school. Ishwaran was also watching all this from the rooftop. He grabbed a cane from a teacher's hand and faced the mad tusker boldly. The elephant covered himself with mud and was looking like a frightening monster. He hit sharply with the cane onto the third toenail of the elephant. It shivered and collapsed. At this point, Ishwaran would leave the story unfinished and get up mumbling, I will be back after lighting the gas or warming up the dinner. Mahendra, who had been listening with rapt attention, would be left hanging. When he returned, Ishwaran would not pick up the thread of the story right away. Mahendra would have to remind him that the conclusion was pending. Well, a veterinary doctor was summoned to revive the animal. Ishwaran would shrug casually. 2 days later, it was led away by its Mahavat to the jungle. At this point, Ishwaran would leave the story and Mahendra remained in a dangling situation. When he returned, Mahendra would have to remind him about pending story. He said a doctor came for the treatment of the elephant, and after 2 days, it had been taken away by its Mahavat to the jungle. Well, how did you manage to do it, Ishwaran? How did you bring down the beast? Mahendra asked him. How did he manage to do that? Well, it had it has something to do with a Japanese art, I think, sir. Karate or jujitsu it is called. I had read about it Somewhere, it temporarily paralyzed the nerve system you see. He replied that it is a Japanese art that is called karate or jujitsu. It paralyzed the nerve system. I studied about it in a book. Not a day passed without Ishwaran recounting some stories packed with adventures, horrors, and suspense. Whether the story was credible or not, Mahendra enjoyed listening to it because of the inimitable way in which it was told. Ishwaran seemed to more than make up for the absence of TV in Mahendra's living quarters. So here, inimitable means typical. Ishwaran describes everything in detail and weaved a new story full of thrill, horror to Mahendra every day. He played a role of TV providing entertainment to Mahendra. So, Mahendra used to enjoy all these stories. One morning, when Mahendra was having breakfast, Ishwaran asked, "Can I make something special for dinner tonight, sir?" After all, today is an auspicious day. According to tradition, we prepare various delicacies to feed the spirits of our ancestors today, sir. One day, Ishwaran asked, could he make special dinner that night? That day was an auspicious day. Mahendra permitted him. That night, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and complimented Ishwaran on his culinary skill. He seemed very pleased but unexpectedly launched into a most garish account involving the supernatural. Here, culinary skill means cooking ability, and garish means detailed. So, that night, Mahendra enjoyed the most delicious dinner and he praised the cooking ability of Ishwaran. He seemed very pleased, but that day, Ishwaran narrated a supernatural story to him so that he became a little fearful. He became frightened. You know, sir, this entire factory area we are occupying was once a burial ground. He started. Mahendra was jerked out of the pleasant reverie he had drifted into after the satisfying meal. Now, here Mahendra became a little fearful hearing that the area where they were living was a burial. I knew on the first day itself when I saw a human skull lying on the path. Every now I came across a number of skulls and bones, Ishwaran continued. Ishwaran said, I knew the thing from the first day when we came here to live. I saw a human skull lying on the path. And even now, he saw a number of skull bones. He continued. He went on to narrate how he sometimes saw ghosts at night. I am not easily frightened by these things, sir. I am a brave fellow, but one horrible ghost of a woman which appears off and on at midnight during the full moon. It is an ugly creature with matted hair and a shriveled face like a skeleton holding a fortress in its arms. He started a horror story. Sir, did you know the area we living was a graveyard? And here he was starting narrating a story. He told how he saw ghost at night. He would see a horrible ghost of a woman at midnight during the full moon. It was ugly creature with matted hair and a shriveled face holding a fortress in its arm. Mahendra shivered at the description and interrupted rather sharply. You are crazy, Ishwaran. There are no such thing as ghosts or spirits. It is all a figment of your imagination. Get your digestive system examined and maybe your head as well. You are talking nonsense. So here Mahendra shivered at the description and said, "You are crazy, Ishwaran. There are no ghosts and spirits. Go and get examined yourself." He left the room and retired for the night, expecting Ishwaran to sulk for a couple of days. But the next morning he was surprised to find the cook as cheerful as talkative as ever. Then Mahendra left the room, thinking that Ishwaran will be upset for 2 days approximately. But it didn't happen. Next morning he saw the cook. He was as cheerful and talkative as ever. From that day on, Mahendra, for all his brave talk, went to bed with a certain uneasy. Every night he peered into the darkness outside through the window next to his bed, trying to make sure that there was no movement of dark shape in the vinc- vicinity, but he could only see a sea of darkness with the twinkling light of the factory miles away. From that day, Mahendra felt uneasiness. Every night he used to peer into the darkness outside through his window that was next to his bed, and he was trying to make sure that there was no movement of any ghost or any vicinity means nearby. There was no any shape of uh, fear nearby its window, his window. But he could not see a sea of darkness with the twinkling light of the factory miles away. He could see only the twinkling light of the factory that was miles away. He had always liked to admire the milk white landscape on full moonlight, but after hearing Ishwaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window altogether when the moon was full. Mahendra had always liked to admire the milk white landscape of full moonlight. It means he liked to watch the full moon. After hearing the Ishwaran's story of the female ghost, he avoided looking out of his window on the full moon day. One night Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by a low moan close to his window. At first he put it down to a cat prowling around for mice, but the sound was too guttural for a cat. He resisted the curiosity to look out lest he should behold a sigh which would stop his heart. But the wailing became louder and less feline. He could not resist the temptation any more. Lowering himself to the level of the window sill, he looked out at the white sheet of moonlight outside. There, not too far away, was a dark, cloudy form clutching a bundle. Mahendra broke into a cold sweat and fell back on the pillow, panting. As he gradually recovered from the ghastly experience, he began to reason with himself and finally concluded that it must have been some sort of auto suggestion, some trick that his subconscious had played on him. So, one night, Mahendra was woken up from his sleep by a low moan close to his window. Means a sound. He was waken up by the sound that was coming nearby his window. The wailing became louder. He looked out of the window. He saw a dark, cloudy form holding a bundle. Mahendra broke into a cold sweat. He could not sleep any more that night. And he was trying to console himself that it was nothing than the subconscious state of his mind. By the time he had got up in the morning, had a bath, and come out to have his breakfast, the horror of the previous night had faded from his memory. Ishwaran greeted him at the door with his lunch packet and his bag. Just as Mahendra was stepping out, Ishwaran grinned and said, "Sir, remember the other day when I was telling you about the female ghost with the photos in its arms? You were so angry with me for imagining things. Well, you saw her yourself last night. I came running hearing the sound of moaning that was coming from your room." So, in the next morning, when Mahendra woke up in the and he had a bath, then he come out to have his breakfast. The horror of the previous night had gone from his memory. Then Ishwar greeted him at the door with his lunch packet in his bag. He smilingly asked about the woman ghost and the sound. He also said to him that you were telling me last day that it was all my imagination, but you have seen the ghost yourself. A chill went down Mahindra's spine. He did not wait for Ishwaran to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. A chill went down Mahendra's spine. He did not wait for Ishwaran to complete his sentence. He hurried away to his office and handed in his papers, resolving to leave the haunted place the very next day. Means here Mahendra was so upset that he resigned his side job immediately. He held his papers, resolving the leave, and he decided to leave the haunted place the very next day. So that's all for today.